Thank you all for being here today. I think this is the last session. So I'm really pleased to see so many people on this one. Before we start, since this is focused on developer-led archaeology, can we have a show of hands, please, all those that work in the private commercial sector? Just now, a show of hands for all those that work in the local government sector. And NGOs? Fantastic. And then any other third-party sectors, lobbyists? No. Have I missed anyone out? Hope not. National government now. Well, we've got a few representatives. Okay, well, thank you very much for attending this session on building green competencies for all archaeologists. Before we start, I'm just going to spend a few minutes setting out the agenda and sort of breaking the ice. So by now, we really all should, as archaeologists, be aware of climate change, the effects of climate change and how we are mitigating and adapting to it. So this session is not intended to go back over old ground. This session is effectively being run by, in association with the CIfA Climate Change Working Group. So whatever hat I or Coralie or anyone else wears, it's under that umbrella. The CIfA Climate Change Working Group was established a few years ago, and contains a mixture of private sector, public sector, and community sector representatives working together for joined up policy and solutions to archaeology and climate change, or on heritage and climate change. So we're going to start off really with a 10-minute presentation to set the scene, explain some of the themes. But after that, the rest of the session will be very much a practical hands-on workshop. For those of you here who are old enough to remember this little red book, back in the day, it kind of set the tone and the scene for methodology and recording. And we've seen various guises of this being adopted up and down the country ever since. We want to try and achieve and emulate this and achieve something similar. But for climate change and archaeology, our goal is to produce a series of toolbox talks for specific themes within archaeology to address climate change, practice, policy and engagement. These would be published online and be able to be drawn down as free resources to cater for these specific themes. We want this to be designed for all engaged with archaeology, not just managers. Okay. It's very much a practical session, and because climate change affects everyone and not just any one group, we want you guys to help co-produce these toolbox talks. As I said, it's going to be very much a practical session. We're going to be using a live case study currently in development archaeology, which has received outline planning consent, and the final master plan has just been produced. Not all of the archaeological work has been finished yet. After that, we're going to split you into various groups covering 4 themes where you're going to look and explore solutions with a climate change hat on. Not necessarily an archaeology hat, but a climate change hat on, okay? But before we start, we're just going to do a short, as I said, 10-minute presentation. So, as I said, this session is on building green competencies for archaeology. We are now observing a significant growth in both awareness of and implications for archaeology from climate change. And as a result of that, archaeology is rapidly moving in a direction where it may be timely to reframe our practice in this context. Legislation and policy, including the Climate Change Act, the Environment Act, the revised NPPF, local plans, master planning, are all now recognising the priority of climate change. Historic England, CADU, Historic Environment Scotland, amongst others, have all now published climate change documentation and strategies. CIfA too have also recently updated their guidance to now require carbon reduction plans from contractors. Developers and contractors alike are increasingly recognising the need for climate resilience and have to be accountable for their work plans and practices. Equally, in light of current government priorities for growth, potentially inverted commas at all costs, and of course climate change, it is vitally important that archaeology should be seen to represent part of the solution and not part of the problem. So, reframing archaeology. As a consequence of this increasing demand, archaeology needs to be reframed by challenging some of our existing structures and priorities. What is it? How do we do it? Who do we do it for? And ultimately, why do we do it? Development-led archaeology is often, but not always, a reactive process, although this has been heavily influenced by the planning system. In this context, archaeology has been framed in the capacity of compliance. However, as archaeologists, we all know deep down that archaeology is so much more than that. Whilst archaeology is not a silver bullet that can fix all of life's problems, it can proactively contribute to addressing many of the issues caused by climate change. Climate change is, of course, a very broad domain, but it encompasses things like sustainability, well-being, placemaking, communities, all of which we've previously discussed in the last session. And of course, climate change and these categories of sustainability and resilience, they're championed by both the public sector and political stakeholders, all of which development-led archaeology can have a significant contribution to. Whilst climate change presents many challenges, it equally presents many opportunities to reframe archaeology as an enabler for climate change, for climate action, and can positively contribute to future-proofed communities. One of the means of achieving these lofty goals is through green competencies or green skills. So what do we mean by green competencies? So, green skills refer to the knowledge, abilities, values, and attitudes needed to live in and support a sustainable, resource-efficient society that reduces the impact of human activity on the environment. They are essential for transitioning to a low-carbon economy and addressing environmental challenges. So I accept that's a very broad spectrum and may require a wholesale change of approach that covers every element of archaeology. However, if we break this down onto an individual project level, then it becomes more of a manageable task. And if we further break that individual project down into its constituent parts, it becomes easier still. But in order to achieve these elements, we need to think about archaeological knowledge, archaeological abilities, archaeological values, archaeological attitudes, all framed within a climate change approach. So how do we achieve this? Well, essentially by providing archaeologists with the skills they need to competently address these issues. Green skilling in regard to climate change and development-led archaeology can come in many forms. We have awareness and knowledge of carbon and the methods to reduce it, such as carbon literacy. We have awareness and knowledge of other planning environmental disciplines' work to tackle climate change and how we fit into that broader spectrum. And we've heard from ecologists today. I had an ecologist on our table. Hannah's session before, we talked about the natural environment and how we work with them and their issues that they have to play. A willingness for archaeology to align priorities with archaeological ones. Sorry, a willingness to align archaeological priorities with environmental ones. Sorry, Coralie, I've lost the cursor.
Where are you trying to be? This one?
Scroll down.
Down? Oh. Interesting.
Oh, you should touch the screen. Perfect. Okay. Yeah, it's better. Yeah, it's better. Sorry. Also, an ability to use our existing skills beyond compliance to influence development outcomes positively in order to contribute towards sustainable communities. So before we move on to the next slide, I'd just like, again, a raise of hands. Can I have a raise of hands of all those here who have undertaken carbon literacy training, please? Fantastic. Looks like most of them. Can I have those hands raised now who believe that less than 50% of their organisation or individual group is carbon literacy trained? So less than 50%. Can I have a final raise of hands? Those believe that 100% of their organisation or small group is carbon literacy trained. Interesting. Thank you. So we're all carbon literacy trained, but our fellow colleagues are probably not. Thank you. However, in order to get to these lofty levels, it requires a different approach, creative approaches, a move that encompasses the safety of tradition, what we've done for the last 30 years, but also looks to innovate. It is with creative solutions that archaeology can reposition itself as a driving force for future-proofed communities. So, for instance, how can archaeology help to create green corridors that run through our historic cities and work with our historic buildings stock? How can archaeology use its knowledge of historic crafts and building vernacular to help influence regional and local design? How can archaeology use its ability to bring diverse communities together through shared goals to create resilient communities? How can archaeology use its knowledge of geology, paleoarchaeology and historic watercourses to help alleviate flooding? How can archaeology use its existing techniques to better understand before and when we employ environmentally damaging excavation? And of course, how can archaeology ensure we celebrate our most significant archaeology into new developments? And of course, none of this can be achieved without you. So I'd like to finish off this short presentation before we get on to the more interesting practical stuff with a short video which many of you, or some of you, or many of you may have seen by Dr. Marcy Rockman from the National Park Service, who really sums up this whole area. She produced this video for COP26 in conjunction with, it's only a 1 minute video, with Citizens, Scape and Cherish, and highlighted the issues of archaeology, climate change, place and the relationship between them, and to help highlight green competencies and redefine positive stories that archaeology can tell. I hope this works.
COP26 is bringing people together from around the world to strengthen global action on climate change. And all of the places they are coming from have culture and heritage, which hold the histories and meanings of how people have come to live in all of those places. The themes of these videos began as a project I created called Every Place Has a Climate Story, which connects climate, heritage, and place so that U.S. National Park Service rangers could talk with visitors about climate change in any park they were in. In the years since, this Climate Stories project has traveled widely and captured the attention and enthusiasm of many people and colleagues around the world. These places and stories show us the long trajectories of change in our environments and how we have lived in them. They show us the history and origins of industrialization, which is the history of climate change itself. And they share how communities are using sites that are now appearing along coasts to rebuild older practices and traditions and build new connections with each other. It's time to bring these together, to know that climate stories are not only interesting and fun and nice to have. Rather, they are essential to building our capacity to speak about and share the things and places that matter most to us in all the places we live.
Thank you very much.
Nope.
COP20.
Right. Okay. So, what are we doing here today? So in the abstract, we talked about presenting a toolbox talk. And what you will get today is maybe a reflection of what that could be in the future. Because when we started doing this, we realized archaeology, we were thinking about where any training might be delivered. Are we delivering this on Teams? Are people delivering it in site huts? Is it being delivered as e-learning? And we realized that it kind of needs to be all of these things, and it potentially needs to be all of these different aspects, depending on the work that we're doing, the environments we're working in, the objectives that we're trying to meet. And so what that means is it needs to be very flexible. So as we're looking to provide new training, new resources, new support, we need to understand what people need for a start, where are the gaps, but also try and understand the different categories of areas where this kind of training might need to be filled into. So what we're going to do today is we've given you a task. As Dan says, it's based on a live site. On your tables, there is information about the site, which you can get into in a minute. But we have one site, we have an objective, and then we have 4 different things for you to be looking at, depending on which table you are on. So there's 2 of each, and then we'll have some feedback and discussion. But I want you to be keeping in your head throughout this, how do I feel about this? Do I feel like I have the skills to do this? If I think I've got the skills to do this, do my colleagues have these skills? Do the subcontractors or clients that I work with have these skills? Because that will feed into our broader discussion at the end, and hopefully what we are then able as CIfA members to support each other and you know, as the CIfA Archaeology and Climate Change Working Group in the future. So the task. We have a greenfield site, and it is being planned for a major master plan development of a huge number of homes, about 2,000. It's part of a local planning authority allocation, so there's already been a process by which this area was identified as a good area for building new homes. And within the site, within this greenfield area, there are 2 scheduled moated manor houses, sort of sites, moated sites anyway. They're both medieval. They are both also on the Heritage at Risk register due to different factors in terms of trees and animal burrowing, but both have been identified as being at risk. And so anything that's happening, we need to make sure that they're not going to be further at risk, and also there's an opportunity there, which you can maybe talk about. However, when geophysics was then done, it was identified that not only do we have these 2 medieval sites, we also have a Roman road, and along it, a Roman roadside settlement. So there's information about that in your packs. Now, this site was identified as being likely to be of national significance, and Historic England were interested in scheduling it, and indeed it has now been scheduled. So for the developer, that's a real challenge. We've got an area of the site which needs to be effectively somehow taken out of the developable area, and that had the potential to make the entire scheme of delivering much needed, affordable, good quality homes for this community, to put that at risk. So the question that we have for you is to explore this objective, which is to deliver this housing. That's the LPA's and the developer's objective, and its associated infrastructure. So we need to think about how people are moving around the site. We can't just have a big bit in the middle that nobody can cross. You know, it's got to be interconnected. It's going to have public space, it's going to have amenity, it's going to have public facilities, and it needs to have as much on-site biodiversity net gain as possible. It's also intended to follow Garden City principles. So there's some information about that in your packs, and to contribute to the local planning authority's overarching sustainable development goals. So that is a huge objective, but we've already said we want you to have a climate change hat on. So we're asking you to be archaeologists, and we're asking you to be looking to support net zero objectives. So we have 15 minutes to discuss in your groups. This is quite tight. To imagine you work for an archaeological contractor or consultant. You've been engaged at the beginning of the process, so you're not coming in late to the party. What is the most sustainable approach you can propose for undertaking the archaeological assessment of the site and integrating this into the environmental, technical, and placemaking aspects of its design? And while that's a really big question, we want to focus, when we say sustainable, on net zero, which is what's on your sheets. Obviously, that's a bigger question and you can think about that, but specifically in these 15 minutes, net zero. So we have 8 groups, 8 tables, and there are 2 groups who have the part of this question, which is archaeological fieldwork. So you're looking at the task of undertaking the archaeological investigation of the site with that question. And then we have the post-excavation, archiving, legacy 2 groups. And then we have design and placemaking, and we have integration with water management and environmental design. And then we will be asking you to present your proposal back to the room. We've said 5 minutes, it'll be 2.5 because we've got double the number of groups than we had anticipated. So it will be very, very quick. So yeah, off you go.